who don't know me. We're so happy to have Peter with us here today when we're starting out with our ending up actually our summer PowerLunch series, and this is our co-working month. So we wanted to save a big bang for last, Peter. And we know that looking at your bio and everything, we've got somebody who's going to give us a great topic. Peter is a business advisor with Resultants. He's worked for Fortune 500 companies, including Coca-Cola, Philip Morris, and McDonald's across 5 continents in over 60 countries. In his work with Results, he works with small business owners and their teams to implement a simple process designed to move their companies further, faster. I think that as small business owners, all of us want to move faster, don't we? And closer as we're getting to the end of our careers, what's our exit strategy and all those other kinds of things so we can get the most bang for our buck, right? So we welcome Peter today. I'm going to tell you all that we will have just a moment to silence your cell phones, and then we will have a great session here. All of this will be done and recorded on our YouTube channel so that you'll be able to share it with friends, share great information, and we'll all be able to connect to it. So without any further ado, Mr. Peter Beaumont, thank you for coming.
Second. Lauren, did you take the clicker?
That was just a test to see.
I want you to know I remained calm during that. What was going on inside was completely different. So, thank you, Laurie, for the introduction.
Thank you for stealing the clicker.
And let's see if it works. Yeah, that's me. So, as you can see, the subject we're going to discuss today is growing a thriving business. And I want to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of a vision and a definition of what a thriving business is. So this is where you help me out. So I want you to strike a mental image of what a failed business looks like for you. So once you've got a mental image, what are the words that describe that for you? So I just throw them out. What does a failed business look like? Struggling. What else?
Frustration.
Frustration. What else? Bankrupt, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
Dysfunction.
Thank you. Dysfunction. I like all of those. So having started on a great high note, let's move on to something more optimistic. How would you describe a valuable business? Again, mental image. What's a valuable business look like to you guys, and what words would describe that?
Growing.
Thank you. I like that one. Growing.
Profitable.
Profitable.
Energy.
Energy. Good.
Engaged.
Engaged. All right. All of those are great descriptors. So I can now move on because we all understand the same language in terms of what a failed business versus a valuable business looks like. And so I want to tell you a brief story. Something that's based on something that actually happened. Jim and Molly started separate businesses, similar industries, in different states, and the businesses grew quite quickly. But they both hit a ceiling at about the right time. They maxed out. And Jim immediately started dealing with the issues. And if you fast forward a little bit, he's now enjoying his vacation home in Florida on a regular basis. Meanwhile, Molly, unfortunately, she's the woman, isn't it, dreadful? But she's doing 70-hour weeks still. And so the moral of the story, what happened? Why did these two separate companies go in two different directions? And I think one actually took action and had processes they put in place to actually make sure they're a value business, whereas the other did what we call is the definition of insanity. Keep doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result. Working 70-hour weeks without a plan really doesn't do that. So what's the point of this? Here's where I ask for audience participation again. Do you know how many businesses failed in the first 5 years of operation as a percentage? Anybody?
50.
Who said 50? Thank you, Amanda. She's absolutely right. 50%. You can look at it the other way, 50% succeed, I suppose, but 50% fail in the first 5 years, which is why building a valuable business is something we should be doing from the moment we start the business, so as to protect ourselves as we move forward. Resultants, the company I work for, have found that businesses feel stuck because they're maxed out. And we've lived it, and we've grown, and failed, and come out the other side. And I think when you've been through those experiences, you're well set to help small businesses go through that period. Every business gets maxed out at some stage. We're advocates for the best interests of the business so that we can go further, faster, and we want to strive over time and sustain our business. Now, just very briefly, and then we'll move on into the content. I think you need to know that our owners, Terry and Steve Wilcox, founded this business about 20 years ago. So we haven't been around for 5 minutes. And they've been through growing and failing and coming out the other side. So what we talk about is based on experience. Right, let's move to a little bit more of what we did. What they did was take processes from people like Patrick Lencioni, Jim Kynes, and mold it into processes which have proven time and time again to add value to businesses and sustain them, by the way. We keep clients for a lot longer than the average 5 or 6 years. So if we begin with the end in mind, and we've all heard this before about beginning with the end in mind when you start a business, the thing you really need to think about is the destination. And so, can you click it forward? It's not working. Thanks. So, and normally when we start small businesses, and I'm certainly one of those people who've done that, is we start with an idea which is probably going to last 6 months or a year, but we haven't really thought much further than that. Unless you really think about the destination 9 to 10 years ahead, you don't really arm yourself with all the things you need to do to get there. So one of the things we need to do is build value. Once we know the destination, how do we build value into that business? And then once we've decided how to do that, then what operating model are we going to use to get there? Now, we're not going to go into each of those today. What we are going to focus on is the value piece of the formula and how you can build value into your business. So, and again, good. So, what comes to mind when you talk about value? Is your income outstripping your expenses? That would be a good indicator of a value business. Are you selling more than you've ever sold? That would also be another good indicator of whether you've got a valuable business. But I would suggest to you there's some other things too. For example, if you lost your biggest customer tomorrow, would you go out of business? Probably all of you would. So some of the things we have to think about is things that go beyond just the normal financials. And we'll get to that in a second. John Warrilow, who wrote this book some years ago, I believe 2004, discovered that there were 8 drivers that really contribute to the value of a business. And since he surveyed that, researched it, he launched the Value Builder system, and over the last few years he's surveyed over 30,000 companies and found that those value builders really are the major contributors to how a system, to how a company actually increases their multiplier and becomes valuable. So, as you can see here in a second, now, I know you can't see that clearly, don't worry, we are going to go through another chart. But those are the 8 key value builder drivers, and we're going to walk through each one of those. It's the next slide. There it is. We'll walk through those next, and presumably you can see those a lot more clearly than you could the other one. So I'm going to go around this value circle with you and give you a glimpse into how these work together. Now, there's no rocket science in these. Every good process I've ever read is never really rocket science. It's nothing new. It's how you put it together. And so that's the secret sauce in this. It's how you put these 8 together and make them work for you. So we're going to start with the first one, and we'll go around this randomly, as you can see. We haven't started at the top. So I'm going to start with the Switzerland structure. Now, when you think of Switzerland, what comes to mind apart from the fact they've got lovely ski slopes and cowbells? Sorry?
Watches.
Watches, that's a good one.
Usual.
You said that. Very good. Why is that important?
Objective look at things.
Yeah,
Open-minded.
yeah. It's independence, isn't it? Switzerland are obsessed with being neutral or independent. So much so they only joined the UN in 2002, which is over 50 years after it was first formed. They didn't send anybody to Iraq. They certainly didn't contribute in the First or Second World War. The reason that is so important to our businesses is we need to be less reliant on certain things than we probably are. Now, if you're a solopreneur, when you first start, you're going to be reliant on certain things. I understand that. But if you're going to grow your business and add value to it, you need to achieve some level of neutrality. And how we do that is in three ways. The first one is less dependence on key customers. Now, I worked for an agency for 8 years, which is one of McDonald's 2 below-the-line agencies. And they not only did our business depend 85% on McDonald's, but we supplied 50% of the Happy Meal toys to McDonald's. So 85% of our revenue was based on one client who was 80% of our business. And in spite of the leadership team, which I was part of, trying to convince the company to move away from that, they didn't. I left the company in 2012 when I went to starting my own consultancy. And I learned last year that they just lost the McDonald's Happy Meal business. That was a $600 million privately owned company, which is now doing about $50 million and still falling. So lesson learned on that one, I think. The second one is less dependence on key employees. So if you have 3 or 4 salesmen and one of them's contributing 90% of the business, you've probably got a problem if they decide to go to the competition or they fall under a bus tomorrow. So again, we should be in a position where we're trying to be less dependent on key employees. Bus images. Can't get away. So then the third one is less dependence on key suppliers. And again, I'll use the McDonald's example because I think it's a good one. They, with very limited number, across the board, they used to have at least 2. I mentioned to you that I was with an agency that was 1 or 2 below-the-line agencies. They did the same thing with chicken, with meat, so 3 chicken suppliers, 4 meat suppliers, 3 potato suppliers, they still do. And over the years, this has saved them millions of potential lost sales because what they did is they made sure every second or third supplier could make up on a temporary basis a fallout if somebody went down. And that happens. Factories burn down. They go out of production for whatever accidental reasons. And so they managed to maintain their consumer base and supply on a regular basis by being less dependent on key suppliers. Another example of that would be to move into the supplying business yourself and take over some of your suppliers. So, let's move on to the next one. Financial performance, and that's the obvious one. We talked about it a little bit a few minutes ago. Financial performance is obvious. When we talk about financial performance, we talk about 3 things mainly. The first is top line revenue. The second would be bottom line profit, right? The obvious drivers. But there's a third that doesn't normally come to mind for people, which is formalizing of bookkeeping. Making sure that you've got, it's not just you doing QuickBooks, but there's somebody independent that maybe just comes in and audits your QuickBooks, but can say, yes, these are trusted and they're independent, and we can open them up and you can trust the numbers that are there. Let's go to the next one, growth potential. The reason growth potential is so important is that when somebody looks at your business and looks at the value of it, they're looking at 2 things. If you can grow your business on a consistent basis, then you're already seeing that there's a future profit. There's a formula or a process that can obviously get there if you've got a successful business. What you're buying normally when you buy a business or acquire is future cash flow stream. And you can't do that unless you can prove that that business can grow over time. So I'd like, let me just play a little question for you. If you walked in tomorrow to work and suddenly, through an act of God, you got 5 times the business that you to handle than you had the previous day, would you be able to handle it? forget the people state for a second, but if you've got the processes and the wherewithal, the operating model to actually ramp up quickly, because if you haven't, then there's probably a problem with the value of the business. So how do you grow further faster? Well, the obvious ways are twofold. You can only grow businesses two ways. You sell more stuff to existing customers, or you sell stuff to new customers, right? Fairly simple. But how do you do that? One way is new products to existing customers. So I'll, again, borrow from my previous incarnation. It's not a product I'm going to talk about, but Coca-Cola. I'm going to talk about Diet Coke. In 1983, Second World War, Coca-Cola had a 60% market share. It dropped to 24% by 1980. And the reason was a lot of people were moving into alternative beverages, water, low-calorie drinks, and Coke refused to really change anything. In fact, they didn't, until 1983, they never tampered with brand Coca-Cola. New Coke came later. That's another story. So they decided that they needed to sell to their existing customers things that they were looking for, low-calorie brands. They took the famous Coke brand and they launched Diet Coke. And as we all say, the rest is history. Coke and Diet Coke are the #1 and #2 brands in the world now. And so that's a great example of how to sell a new product to existing customers. Whether it's a line extension or whatever. Second way of doing it would be entering new geographic markets. And that sounds, and I'm going to use a large company example, but it could be as easy as moving to Wisconsin, starting to sell in Wisconsin or North Dakota or South Dakota. But the example I'll use is Netflix, who in 2010 moved into Canada, Canada, and then in 2011 moved into Latin America, and then in 2012 moved into Europe. Netflix subscriptions now are around 130 million worldwide. Only 50 million of that is now in the US. So that's a great example of how moving into new geographic markets, you can expand the value of your business. The third area would be entering new demographic segments. So I'll give you another example of that. Charles Schwab, or Wealth Advisors, they started business with discount brokerages. And they then realized that to increase the value of the business, they needed to move into a new segment. And then they went up market, which was apparently people didn't expect them to do, and they worked with much higher wealth, much more wealthy people in a totally different demographic segment. So a couple of examples there how to grow further, faster, and make more value for your business. Let's go to valuation teeter-totter. Now, I tell you, I struggled with this teeter-totter thing because where I come from, here's the slide. Hang on a second. Where's the slide? I'll go for it. Okay. Didn't miss one? Okay. No. Maybe in my mind. I struggled with this teeter-totter. Where I come from, they call it a seesaw. So, and it makes complete sense because it comes from the French seesaw, which is the sound of a saw going through wood, right? Seesaw. I don't know where you get teeter-totter from, but anyway, I've adapted. I call it a teeter-totter. And really what this is about is the balance between value going up as you increase your cash flow, or you decrease working capital. So that's really what you do. So how do you do that? How do you balance it? So one of the ways is get paid faster, right? So I use a simple example. So you get cash rather than paying through credit cards. The other ones pay bills slower. And one of my first clients was Intel back in 2012. And I wasn't a really good entrepreneur at the start of my business. There were things that I missed. I thought I was good at what I did, but there's lots of things I didn't do very well. One of them was to find out what the payment terms were. And so I invoiced them, and nothing happened. So after about 30 days, I'm like, I paid soon. So I rang them up, and they said, no. our payment terms are 90 days. I said, 90 days, we'll be dead by then. 90 days. And so I said, well, how do you pay quicker? And they said, simple, we'll just take 2.5% off your invoice and we'll pay you 45. So I've since found out that a number of companies do that. So as entrepreneurs, I now pay my bills, so I'm not used to it. And so that helps with the cash flow. Not quite Intel, but I use their tricks. Inventory turn, something else I found out about. I published a book, 2014, and I think about 100 copies were originally published by Amazon. I used Amazon to direct the book. And what I didn't realize is that thereafter, what they did, they printed them as on demand. So if you ordered on Amazon, they print the book within 2 days and deliver it in 3. That's a really smart way of working capital and having no inventory, which is the ultimate. Get creative. Now, I think this is a great example of how to get creative. If you're looking for cash flow, you can't get much more creative than this, in my view. How many of you have owned a Harley Davidson bike? Anyone? I didn't think this was the target market. So,
How many want it or?
that was my next question. How many would like to have it? Okay, so back in 1983, Harley were looking to increase their cash flow. And they did not want to come up with a new bike. The range was extensive. They didn't want to invest any more in producing the technology. So, but what they did know is that they had a dedicated group of followers that wanted to mix together, do stories, share stuff about the Harley theme. And so they found that this is what was going on. Men and women of Harley Owners Group all have one thing in common. We love to ride. If you'd love to, want to join us. So they formed a Harley Owners Group. And obviously they charged for that. This was the forerunner of Facebook, by the way. Facebook didn't come out until 2004, so they were doing something before Facebook for their own dedicated group. And today, they have 1 million people subscribe at a minimum of $49 a year. Not a bad cash flow, huh? On top of that, these people who are members spend another 30% on merchandise, accessories, clothing, and attending events. So a very creative way of getting cash flow and increasing the value of your business. The next one's recurring revenue. It's one of my favorites because I was taught as an entrepreneur, how can you sell stuff when you're asleep? Well, I'm all for that. Right? One of the things I experimented with was Udemy, where you can put out videos and charge people for things that you know about. And it's a great way for recurring revenue. But let me talk about the model for recurring revenue that some of you may have thought about. I hadn't to this extent. Until I got involved with the Value Builder system. And so if you imagine rungs of a ladder and we'll start at the bottom rung, consumables, and I'll give the example of coffee because pretty much everybody I know drinks coffee. And so unless we consume it outside the home, we'll buy it at Caribou or Target or Kowalski's and take it home and consume it at home first thing in the morning. The next level of recurring revenue for manufactured coffee would be sunk money consumables. So you offer the consumer Keurig coffee, and now you have to buy the pods. Same strategy as Hewlett-Packard buying their printer cartridges. Same strategy with the razor manufacturers, where you have to buy their razor having bought a hand. The next rung of the ladder would be subscriptions. And so subscriptions, let me give you an example, would be Bloomberg, where you buy subscriptions to how the stock market works, and so you've got really good insights. If you wanted to go to the next model, which would be sunk money subscriptions, then you buy their terminal, rent it or buy it, and then you get the data the best way portrayed to the way you want it. The next rung of the ladder would be auto renewal. How many of you use iCloud or the variation of iCloud? Right? So we all pay a monthly fee for that. And so great recurring revenue. Right? And then the ultimate probably becomes contracts. where you sign up for 2 to 3 years and you get revenue on a monthly basis for a service that you've agreed to perform. And that's probably the ultimate recurring revenue you can have. And so this is the way you want to, that's the way you want to move from the bottom up to the top. And so I challenge you to think about in your businesses what sort of recurring revenue you can see somebody cheering over there. They've either got it or they've thought about how to do it. I'm not quite sure which. The next one's monopoly control. And, I'm going to read this because Warren Buffett said it, so I don't want to misquote Warren Buffett. I might be in a lot of trouble. Warren Buffett calls this the ability to control pricing with a high profit margin by building a moat deep and wide around your business. So how do you do that? How do you build a moat deep and wide around your business? Anybody any ideas?
Oh, it's kind of Jobs' idea of the ecosystem that he created around Apple.
Yeah,
So you got to be inside of it to,
that's the concept.
yeah.
And by the way, how he did that was product differentiation. So if you remember when the iPhone came out, it did, 2000, other test question. I didn't say the end of that. When did the iPhone come out? And I've got, thought to sell was a prize if you get it right. When did the iPhone come out?
06.
Sorry?
06.
No, it's earlier than that.
Nah,
I wasn't selling AT&T, right?
he's very close.
Is he?
7.
I sold wireless phones.
I know.
That's a good story.
It was either 5 or 7, wasn't it?
Right.
So very good. So in order to do this, you need to differentiate your product. Because the more differentiated your product or service, the more customers care about that difference. And the more they care about that difference, the more you can control the pricing. And Apple is a classic case of that. So how do you get control? Gave you the clue already. Create a better mousetrap, or differentiate an existing product by being inventive. And again, the iPhone is probably the best example. There's a number of others. Or develop a marketing strategy that makes you different, but people have to care about it. Just being different isn't enough. They have to care about it as well. So I'll give you an example of that, which I think is very appropriate. And it's for Tesla Motors. They, as you probably know, started with sports cars, and then in 2012, they decided to move into the luxury sedan market. And they were looking for a differentiator that customers would care about. And they started with performance. And they thought that that was something that customers cared about. And by the way, they did. But it really wasn't a differentiator, because although they could do 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds, so could Jaguar R, BMW M5, and a number of other cars. So that really didn't work as far as a differentiator. Then they looked at, well, what else is different about us? Well, we designed in California. Customers didn't care. They buy cars from Japan, they buy from Michigan, they buy from Germany, so on. What they didn't hit on though was this, zero emissions, which is something, an electric car obviously has zero emissions, and it's something that their consumer cared about, and it was a big differentiator. And so all their advertising as a result of that focused on the zero emissions. Let's move to customer satisfaction, and that customer satisfaction sounds obvious, I mean, you don't provide customer satisfaction, you're not going to have a valuable business. But let's dig a little bit deeper. There was a guy called Fred Reichheld that did some research into this, and he looked at customer surveys and whether they actually gave you any idea of, or had any predictive ability about how valuable business would be. The customer satisfaction surveys performed no better than those that were rated poorly. So it wasn't predictive at all. And part of the problem is the questions that they were being asked. So you've got to be really careful about what question you ask. And what he found is that what was predictive about how valuable your business could be and what its growth would be was something he called the Net Promoter Score. And it's simply this. This is the question. Using a 0 to 10 scale, 0 being the lowest, obviously, how likely is it that you would recommend a product, service, company to a friend or colleague? But it wasn't just the quantitative side of the equation, it was also what they got fed back to them about why. The second question has to be why. Why did you give that rating? Because that way you can start to find out where the opportunity to change the product is. So if you look at 4 companies that are leaders in their industry, clearly, and you look at the average in that industry, all those 4 companies use that customer survey process. And so you'd have to argue fairly convincingly that that's the reason why they're leaders. They tapped into what their consumers think is what they care about and how they can differentiate it. So, the last value driver we're going to touch on here is called hub and spoke. And you normally hear hub and spoke explained when we talk about airlines, right? So regional airlines feeding from cities around the US into airports that fly out internationally, so San Francisco, JFK, Atlanta. But in this case, we're going to talk about hub and spoke a little bit differently, which is the hub is the owner, looking at one around the corner. And here's what, if that owner was taken out of the hub, in this particular case, it will be a worthless business. Because you can't have one person making all the decisions for everything that goes on in the company. So anybody looking at valuing that business would say, that person has a heart attack, it's not around for any reason. There is no business. And so you cannot guarantee future wealth, therefore it can't be a valuable business. If you're stuck in the day-to-day operation of the company, you don't have the things that the time to do what you started the company in the first place for, and you have that great vision. You're working in the business instead of on the business. So how do you fix that? How to get away from it? There's a couple of ways you can do it. One is create systems that employees can follow. So, that's what manuals are for, really, I suppose. So rather than it being every time you want to find out something, you ask the owner, you've got a process you can follow and get on with. I know it sounds obvious, but sometimes we just don't do it. Or we don't change processes. We just carry on doing them because they've always been done that way. A great story I heard a while ago about a gathering at Thanksgiving, and there were various levels of family in that Thanksgiving. There was a guy quietly having a drink in the corner. He noticed that the hostess was cutting the back off the ham and then putting it into the pan. And thought, why is she doing that? So he went and asked, she said, I don't know, we've always done it that way. So, and he spotted Mum over the other side, so he ambled over with his drink and said, hey, I want to ask you something. Jane was saying that, cuts the ham off. What? And it's a tradition. Why do you always do this? I have no clue. But Grandma's over there in the corner, you can go and ask her. Amazing how they all get together. So he wanders over to Grandma and he says, look, your daughter and her daughter can't tell me why you cut the ham off and put it in the pan. Apparently this is tradition. Why? She said, oh, that's simple. He said, when I was doing it, we didn't have a pan big enough. So we had to cut the back off so we could put it in. You see, that's how processes carry on ad verbatim and never get changed. So we have to not only create systems employees can follow, but also check and make sure the processes we're doing are the most efficient. Automate as much as possible. So in my small business, solopreneur, like a lot of us, I use Buffer to load up my social media. So load it up for the week, 2 a day. It's automated. I use MailChimp to get out emails, blasts, like a lot of you, I'm sure, in this room. Hootsuite QuickBooks, they're all automation, and they're all things that small businesses can use. Google for doing calendar entries, it's a great one too. But instead of exchanging 1,000 emails, but when should we meet, what time, where, you can just put out a calendar and they can tap into your calendar. Take vacation. You know, that's a great test. You go away for a couple of weeks, or even a week. What happens? Does the roof fall in? If it does, you've probably got a problem being the hub. So, sort of building up to the summary here. I bet you'd be interested in knowing what your score is, wouldn't you? So what is your score? And I'm not even going to tell you what typically we find in terms of what the score is. But we'd like to give you the opportunity of taking that valuable questionnaire. And in fact, for those of you in the room, there's a feedback form which we really like you to fill out. And then, as a result of that, we'll send you the opportunity to fill it out and take the questionnaire. How long does it take, Katie, to complete?
Usually about 15 minutes.
Right. I think a good investment to build the value of your business. That wasn't on the script, no. So, I just, the other thing, for people that are streaming this, you can go online and I'll show you the website. So first of all, answer the questionnaire, and then you can instantly get your score. By the way, if you get 75, we'd like to know about it. That's pretty good. We're aiming for 80 to get people up to at least 80. So if you go onto our website, you can download. Correct, Katie?
It's a link.
Thank you. There's a link there to be able to complete the questionnaire. And before I open up the questions, I just want to thank everyone for attending. I hope you found the subject interesting and the content useful, but particularly actionable. Not all of it will be, but I'm hoping there's a few little things that you can take away and either think about or act upon. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions. Right. Thank you, Laura.
How many people were keeping score? We're doing some things back there. We need to do some work. That's right. Okay, it's just a few little announcements. First of all, thank you so much, Peter. We will be putting this in this week at office centers, the link that we put in and sent out to all of our members every Monday, because I think this has been an important topic and one that should be referenced. So any of you can click on that link and you can send it to the next person, or you can put it on your website. That's how all of us get better SEO, when you share this with friends, right? So tomorrow is work free on Friday. Come to any of the 6 locations and you can work for free. You can bring your guest. Monday is our last buy one, get one Monday. So if you have a full-time space or you're looking for friends to sign a contract, you get signed for a month and you get a month free. And this is double referral month if you have friends who want to come to office centers. We will pay you a double referral. Nate, I know you're really good at that, so you might want to collect on that, because September, get back to work, get back to school, right? It's a good time. In September, we have Labor Day off. I'm giving everyone the day off, just an FYI. And we have a couple of morning events here in Woodbury. Good Morning Woodbury. It's going to be a chamber event held here on Thursday the 6th from 7:30 a.m. to 9. I know you're going to be there, Ruth, right? Usually you're at those events. And then we also have Park Connect. So if you're on the other side of town, we have 2 events going that day, one in Woodbury, one in St. Louis Park. France on Court from 4 to 6 on 9/11. Slice of Woodbury, everybody loves it. Pizza lunch here, and a great networking group from 11:30 to 1 on the 18th. Slice of the North Loop, that's going to be in our Union Plaza location on September 25th. And then our Power Lunch next month is Deborah Peddler, and she'll be speaking on 5 guides to improve business communications. I thank you so much. I know that you did quote Warren Buffett. While you were here, I'm going to quote Jimmy Buffett. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. So if anybody would like to go in and network, we'll open the wine bar and you can have a glass of wine. And I think that could wrap up a great day. Have a good summer weekend, and we'll see you next time.